Are you back with me? I almost got lost in that one. What a wonderful thing to be lost for a period of time. You undoubtedly remember the creation stories of the Hebrew Scriptures. On each of the 7 days of creation, the forms that make up the world as we know it were fashioned. The light and the darkness, the seas and the land, the birds and the beast, and the capstone of creation, man and woman, who inhabited the idyllic Garden of Eden. And on each of these days of creation, the God of creation was pleased with what had been made and pronounced it good. This creation story, the one that I'm most familiar with, is one of dozens of distinct stories and myths from cultures throughout the world, and parallels can be found in that multiplicity of accounts that point to one universal truth. A succinct concept of one of these stories, that which comes from Taoism, demonstrates some of the commonalities and allows for us a broadening of our understanding. And here it is briefly. There was something featureless, yet complete, born before heaven and earth, silent, amorphous. It was the Way. The Way gave birth to unity. Unity gave birth to duality. Duality gave birth to Trinity. Trinity gave birth to the myriad creatures. The myriad creatures bear yin on their back and embrace yang in their bosoms. They neutralize these vapors and thereby achieve harmony. Note how that parallels very clearly the creation story that I'm familiar with, and perhaps you as well. And if you will, allow me to construct a cosmology this morning that can be useful to us as we begin our consideration of this month's theme, that of interconnection. So where do we begin? As the Tao says, we begin before heaven and earth. We begin with the source. Now, I'm convinced of a few things about source. This comes from my experience. For me, it has no beginning and no apparent ending. It doesn't have a form as we know forms. It's more energy than it is matter. It's a rock-solid foundation, unchanging. Everything that exists emanates from source, and it is unqualifiedly good, compassionate. So follow with me as I attempt to see how these qualities and characteristics work themselves out in our world. Did you notice that unity was the nature of that unfolding of creation? Nothing that comes from source is distanced or divided from source, and no creation is divorced from any other. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In that slice of time and space before creation, all of creation's potential was in darkness or without form. Nothingness, it would seem, except for the incipient energy from which all forms would ensue. Nonetheless, that energy was rock solid, on the verge of creation as we know it, and all good. Not having form, it had what we might consider a mother nature, to put it in anthropomorphic terms. A nature wherein the mother keeps her brood, however large, together as one family. And then we begin to see that brood take form as light enters, land emerges, seas are generated, flora and fauna appear. All of this comes from source, flows from source, and all exists in unity, inextricably connected. All of this wholeness, this goodness, this oneness emerges before we, whom we view to be the capstone of creation, ever come on the scene. Of course, you know the story. Humankind does make the scene, created by source, coming into view differently in various creation narratives, but a common theme prevails. All is connected, connected to source, and connected to each other element of creation. Going back to the familiar creation story, man and woman were created whole and fully good in nature, reflective of and intimately connected with source. They fit in nicely with the rest of creation in one great togetherness. The Garden of Eden and all of its inhabitants were perfection personified. And then, an aspect of the creation of humankind shows itself for the first time, the exalted ability to choose. That ability is part and parcel of human creation. And as you know, the option to choose to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil presented itself. And even though counseled not to do so, Adam and Eve did eat of that fruit, turned away from the unity of their origin, and took a dive into dualism, where good and bad, right and wrong prevailed. This soon worked itself out as an exercise in separation, with Adam blaming Eve and Eve blaming Adam. It proceeded to conflict between brothers and eventually families and nations, each on their own separate side of the challenges they faced. Unity, the state in which humankind was created, was forgotten. From that time until now, we have operated primarily in the world of separation. Sad and a bit crazy, is it not? But flashes of sanity, bits of remembrance, these have dotted human history. Spiritual masters have known and lived the goodness and the unity of our original state. Sages like Rumi have counseled out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Yet most of creation has yet to know that oneness again. For some time as a whole, we've been increasingly divorced from physical creation, sometimes plundering it for personal advantage. At this time in history, we seem to be no better than the barbaric past as hate is sown. Us against them is known, and seeming evil prevails over memories of good. But recall, as we do in unity, all is not as it seems to be. What appears before our physical eyes is an illusion. Unity is yet available. The truth of our connectedness has not been canceled. It simply must be remembered. We must go back to the garden. As Joni Mitchell penned 50 years ago, we are stardust. We are golden. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. So, as I usually say, how do we do that? How do we get back to the garden? How do we get back to that original state that we truly are, that truly is our nature? And let me suggest 4 ways to remember again that state in which we were created. Number 1, withdraw from the illusion. So it's very easy to be caught up in news. And the news is not presenting a picture, for the most part, of unity, but more of separation. Easy to get caught up in that, but possible to withdraw from that. Possible to choose our thoughts. Possible to choose that which comes into us. Number 1, withdraw from the illusion, because that is not truth. That is not verity. That is not things as they really are. Number 2, affirm, affirm, affirm. In Unity, we talk often about affirmation. And it was very powerful. It's a very powerful thing for us to bring into our lives the practice of affirming. And that affirming changes things. That affirming helps us to remember who we truly are. So it can be very simple. I am one with all creation. I am one with the one. We are all one. Whatever affirmation you may choose, I recommend that you use it often, that you post it on your refrigerator or on your bathroom mirror, that you take that truth that resonates with the core of your being and saturate yourself with it. Number 3, this is one of my favorites. Connect with nature. Nature seems to remember much better than we do that we are all one. I'm going to share a story that of something that happened to me this week. I love to hike, as many of you may know. And I'm fortunate to live only a few blocks from the forest. So I have a regular hike that I take. As I go into the forest, go up and down hills on the path to a place that we have called the House in the Woods. The House in the Woods is a collection of rocks that look somewhat like the rooms of a house. And it looks out on the beautiful valley and the mountains beyond, the Mazatal Mountains. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous setting. And for me, it inspires quiet. I love to sit there in the quiet. I enjoy the quiet of sitting there equally, if not more, than the walk to get there and to come back. So the other day, as I went out there, I sat and I became quiet, sitting on the rock in what I call the sitting room, looking out on that gorgeous view with the mountains silhouetted in the near, relatively near distance, and then beyond other ranges of mountains that got grayer and grayer until they were almost invisible at the far extreme of my vision. So I sat in the quiet. I decided to meditate, to just breathe and be. And I was carried away by that experience. Because as I looked out at that scene, or even closed my eyes and was enveloped by it, I didn't feel alone. I felt that I was one with that which surrounded me. One. Completely linked with creation. So I recommend that. Get in a natural setting. Find yourself there. Sense and know the connection that nature knows perhaps better than we. And then a fourth way. See connection in your imagination. Spend your time and your consciousness there. Imagination is a wonderful power that we have, one of our 12 powers. And that ability to perceive and conceive of things maybe as they really are. That is to remember, to reach back in memory and imagine, bring into reality the feeling and the idea of oneness. So spend your time in that consciousness. When you do that, all of this activity will keep you close to Source because the connection is there without question. And so stay close to Source. It is there. It is from that source, that place of source, that all connection flows from. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Neal, for helping us remember who we are and where we've come from. I love the reference to Joni Mitchell's song. It's been in my head all week.